Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee. My name is David Fenley. I am the chair. We do have a quorum. Let's go ahead and dive right into the approval of the agenda. I would entertain a motion to approve.
Chris Bates, I move approval.
I second
Awesome. Chris, thank you. And I'm guessing that's you with the last digits 49 on your phone number?
it.
Yes.
Cool. All right. I will go through the roll call vote. I think I have everybody down. If I did not copy your name down, just chime in and let me know.
Seconded.
I don't want to take those ones.
Who seconded again?
Strong ones.
It's Claudia.
Claudia,
That
thank-
sounded like Daryl, unless I'm wrong.
I don't think Daryl's on just yet. All right, so Claudia seconded. I'll go through the roll call. Patty?
Here.
Carrie?
Here.
And this is a yes or no for the approval of the agenda. Claudia? Not hearing anything, Claudia. Patsy, you can always just give a thumbs up too. Patsy gives it aye. So did Claudia. Diane.
Aye.
Heidi.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Richard.
Aye.
Trevor.
Aye.
David, myself votes aye as well. Did I miss any TAC members?
This is Eric Hendrickson. I would also.
I skipped right over your name. I have it on my list here and I didn't call it. Thank you, Eric. Same process for the approval of the minutes from August. I would entertain a motion.
This is Chris again, David. I'll move the adoption of the minutes.
Thank you, Chris.
I'll second it.
Second. Oh,
Awesome. I appreciate
give
that. All
that to
right.
Heidi.
Thank you very much. All right. So an aye or a nay, a yes or a no works here. I'll go down the list again. Patty.
Yes.
Carrie.
Aye.
Claudia.
Yes.
Patsy.
Yes.
Eric.
Aye.
Diane. Sorry, I'm not looking at the screen, but I see your thumbs up now. Heidi.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Richard.
Aye.
And Trevor.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Thank you all very much for getting through the agenda and the minutes. Let's jump right in. We've talked about this before. The Metro Transit app, we get pretty regular updates. So I'm excited, Adam. If you want to just give us a short overview and then just dive right in. Take it away, Adam.
Yeah. Do I just say next to advance it? Is that the best way to do it, or do I have control? I don't think I have control. Thank you.
Jason's pretty good at that.
Wonderful. Yeah. So it's been a little while, I think, since we've talked about the app here, but back in, let's see, what was it? July, we launched a new version of the app. This was following around 5 years with the previous developer, Movil, a company that changed hands a number of times, went out of business, then was saved by another company, and then, it was our vendor for a little while then too. But really, after 5 years, we felt that it was wise to go out for a new RFP, both to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money, but also considering we've been with the vendor for 5 years, the market had changed a lot since then. Movil was really the first one to the market with mobile ticketing. And at the time when we selected them, there were not really many viable options beyond them. And now there are dozens of options out there. We received a wide range of proposals and with input of people from the council and Metro Transit and outside advisors, including members of this committee, we landed on the new app, which I can talk about now, from our new vendor, Token Transit. Next slide, please. So this is the next phase of mobile tickets and for our mobile app. Back when we signed on with Movil back in 2016, we had different views on what our mobile app would look like and what the sort of roadmap ahead would be. Back then, I think the idea was generally to make it an all-encompassing transportation app that provided transit information and transit tickets, but also eventually integrated other modes of transportation, really trying to hone in on the shared mobility aspect. So offering people access to things like ride hailing services, bike share, scooter share, and whatever else might be on the market, including potentially other Metro Transit services that maybe aren't within the regular bus train network. Over the years, though, we've seen the market shift a lot, and we're trying to be responsive to that. And so we want this app to be designed for flexibility for everyone. We want it to be primarily a mobile ticketing app. There's a lot of ways to get transportation and transit information out there, but there really needs to be one sort of source of record for the ticketing, and that's where the Metro Transit app lives. We provide the tickets, and you can download them through our app. But one of the reasons we selected this vendor is they offer a lot of great options for apps other than Metro Transit to sell our tickets while we still maintain control of those tickets. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. This app is also a little more regionally focused. The previous ticket and app design was really built around Metro Transit's branding with our colors. It had images of our vehicles and things like that built into the ticket itself. And really, it's part of the regional fare system that is used not just by Metro Transit, but the suburban providers like Minnesota Valley, Southwest, Maple Grove, et cetera. And we wanted to make sure that this version reflected the regional fare system better than the previous ticket. This one now featuring colors and the logo of the GoTo card, now kind of the GoTo system, where basically the regional fare system is the GoTo system. Even though these two tools don't talk to each other, i.e. you can't use GoTo value to buy tickets, it's still part of the electronic fare collection system. So now basically anything with that in that bucket will have the GoTo logo on it. And as I mentioned, the ability to sell tickets on other platforms is a big part of that too. As the regional providers bring online their own apps, we want to make sure that the ticket experience and the regional system is maintained. And this version, this app provider allows us to have, say, MVTA, if they picked one app that did transit planning, they could still sell our ticket in that app without having to handle that themselves. Next slide, please. New features on this one. I'll just start by saying that primarily the app was launched to mirror what we had available in the Movil app. Part of that was just to make sure that we were able to launch on time before our Movil contract ended, which ended July 31st. We launched July 16th with this new app, so kind of down to the wire, and we wanted to make sure we launched on time. So we really just replicated the previous version of the app for this lap with a few notable features. One of the key features is improved screen reader compatibility. This was something that we had the app vendors, all of the top vendors, I believe there were 4 top vendors, demonstrate that for us. And this one was one of the better ones for sure. We also are able now to do full native translations of all the Title VI languages. Previously, we have relied on the phone's native translator program, so TalkBack, and I'm blanking on the one for Android, what it's called. But basically, you would have to, or excuse me, not TalkBack. Those are the screen readers. Excuse me. So like the phone's native language support. So we were reliant on whatever Google or Apple decided to support. That did not include all of the local languages that we support. The big standout one being Korean, which is a smaller population and just not well supported with those phones. So now we have the phones set so that everything was manually translated by native speakers. We're not relying on a computer program to translate them, so hopefully having much better experience for those who don't use English as their primary language using our mobile app. And then, of course, like I mentioned, support for third-party apps. There's more coming on that. We haven't done much with it now, but we're in the process of moving forward with that. Next slide, please. So mobile ticketing, it's all about reducing barriers to ride. We know that it's an easy way for customers who don't have exact change or don't have a go-to car or maybe don't even carry cash, excuse me, to access transit quickly and easily. You know, you can go from having no app on your phone to riding the bus within a matter of minutes if you download our app. We also know that customers are using many apps to access transit these days. You know, some notable ones being Google Maps, Transit app, Move It app, things like that. And so one of the things we're trying to do is reduce the barrier that customers have from even having to download the Metro Transit app. If they're already using a trip planning app that they prefer, we don't want to make them download another app simply to buy a ticket. We want to move to where they are, meet them where they are. This was really the philosophy that launched the mobile app 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, is that we knew customers were on their phones, you know, doing everything, paying for things, planning trips, etc. And we wanted to make sure that we were meeting them where they were there. And this is the next step in that. Without supporting their apps, we're giving them an extra step, and we'd like to reduce that. So this vendor allows for easy creation and implementation of mobile ticketing across those platforms. And it's really about keeping it easy for that customer. So that's something we're working on now, currently, making sure that you know, everything works well from a contracting standpoint and things like that. And hopefully in the fall, we'll be moving to having our tickets in other apps. Next slide, please. So this is part of our shared mobility strategy as an agency. It allows us to be on any platform, you know, not just Metro Transit. And it also means that it opens the door to other services like mobility as a service, ticket bundling, things like that. So for example, there are not a ton of options here in the US right now, but in Europe, there are a number of options where you would pay, say, a monthly fee, kind of like your cell phone bill, and you would get X number of transit trips per month, X number of rides on a ride hailing service, and X hours of bike sharing. This app would allow for that if we were to go down that path. And it does look like that's becoming closer to reality here in the US. It's important to note, though, that regardless, the ticketing data will be staying with Metro Transit. They'll still be managed through our customer portal and things like that. And we'll be able to see, you know, the data that we need from those. The other big advantage of this versus, say, Metro Transit becoming a mobility aggregating app where we have all these different vendors on our app, it avoids us having to pick a winner. So let's say we decided, well, we're going to pick Lyft for our ride hailing service on our app. That would by nature exclude Uber potentially. It also protects us, and perhaps customers want to use Uber. We want to make sure that the customer is using what they want. It also protects us in terms of some liability as well. If Lyft were to have a scandal of some sort or did something that ran afoul of what we felt was, you know, good business practices, and we took them off of our app, that could leave our customers stranded without a shared mobility option in their preferred app. So really, what we're going to do then is, you know, we'll be on other apps. And so if you know, the Lyft app actually is a mobility aggregator itself. So if we decided to pull off of that app, we could pull off of a single app, but still be on Transit app or Google or what have you, and not leave the customers necessarily high and dry versus if we were the aggregator. Next slide, please. Are there questions?
Can I speak? This is Heidi.
Yes, go ahead, Heidi.
Okay. My question is for people who have learning disability, you know, the process and to do things. Is this app really easy to download and to follow? Because COVID has changed on the web. You know, when I go to the internet and look for bus stops and look for certain things, they're making it a little bit more complicated. So I need a few people, maybe my friends at this meeting, to teach me how to use the new system, because COVID is changing how we ride the bus all the time. So is this app easy to use and to follow and to download, and I can do all the different steps? I don't always need somebody to, help me?
We think it's very easy to use. It's very linear. Again,
Well,
by moving towards.
what did that mean? I mean, people like to say that it's kind of like saying, oh, it's not that spicy, but then the person gets a reaction from it. So what does that mean?
Well, yeah, I'm going to speak to what I know here, and that is the process of purchasing a ticket is a fairly linear process from when you download the app to signing in. You follow a flow that allows you to first pick your rider type, whether that's an adult rider, a senior youth Medicare rider, or a mobility rider. Once you choose that, you have your ticket options. You would pick what service you'd like to ride, whether that's bus, metro, North Star, or Express, and it would branch off from there. But it presents you with one choice at a time so that you can select the proper ticket. And again, part of the reason we're keeping this simple is so that it's focusing on ticketing and not much else. We certainly have information on transit similar to our previous app, links to our website. But yeah, we wanted to keep it straightforward and simple for everyone to use.
Is that including the reading and including, because some people have a hard time reading certain words, and certain things and don't have the proper tools to do that, have it read to them. So how is it easy to read and understand? Or is it just a lot of fancy words?
I mean, it's literally just our tickets. So it would say everything that you would see in any of our tickets, whether it's an adult fare, a rush hour fare. It doesn't really have anything extraneous other than a few explanations on like when rush hour is and things like that.
And one other question is, if I make a mistake, will it let me fix it, because I'm trying to figure the process out?
Until you purchase a ticket, there is nothing permanent. You can always go back on a step.
All right, thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions for Adam about the relatively new app?
Yeah, this is Trevor speaking. I just had a question. Is there like a beta version of this app that's available to download, even if it's not functional, but it's something you can play around with?
We do have like test versions, but those are generally reserved for like the development staff right now. I mean, the app is out in the wild now, and you can play around with it all the way up until a ticket purchase if you were to download it today. It's available both in Google Play and iTunes App Store currently.
Okay, and it's just Metro Transit. You
Yep.
just type that in.
Yep, and just look for a blue and red circle T with a blue border.
So transit users who are TAC members, feel free to download the app and give it a whirl. Did somebody else have a question?
Yeah, this is Carrie Sheldon. So this is a different app other than what people are already using, because I see other people just showing the phone to the driver. So am I to assume that they've already paid their fare and that's what this app will do?
Yep, correct. The app is out there and it's being used today. It's the same process as the previous app. You show the driver or the police officer on the light rail or the fare inspector on the North Star after you've downloaded it, after you've purchased and activated a ticket.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, this is Vice Chair Paulson. I have a question.
Take it away, Daryl.
On the new app, does it do you still have the ability to look at the route and everything and know when the next bus is coming? Because I know my wife has used the new app before with the drivers, and they really like that because that touchless environment is coming back, in a lot of different areas. And one way to do this is that app. But can the app be transferable? Can it be usable like on Metro Mobility? Or is that, I mean, because if it's another system or a totally different system, then I think that's kind of a waste of effort and waste of money. because at one point we have to be able to use that same type of service throughout our whole transit system and not just use it on the main line or on the light rail. We have to use it throughout the whole system,
So
including Metro Mobility.
the first question regarding information on transit, like planning tools, those are in there just like the old previous app. There's links to our website tools, just like in the last app, where you can see the trip planner, next trip schedules, etc. As far as Metro Mobility, at this time, there is no Metro Mobility ticket on the Metro Transit app. There certainly could be. That just is not something that has been brought forward yet. That would be a decision by Metro Mobility.
Yeah, Matt, because here's also my concern. What if I pay my Metro Mobility fare on Metro Mobility, right? But I'm not taking my return ride because I'm gonna take the bus home because I changed my schedule. So is there any way for me to tell that bus driver, hey, I already just been on Metro Mobility and I should still have that same 2.5 hour window or whatever it is if I'm jumping on the light rail or jumping on the bus home?
That's a little bit out of my area. That would be, if assuming you're paying with a go-to card, you would be able to ride home. Beyond that, I don't know. I only really function in the app world here, and at this time, the app does not offer a Metro Mobility ticket currently.
All right. Thank you.
Do any other members have questions for Adam regarding
This is Heidi.
Go ahead, Heidi.
So does the app know that I am disabled and so I get the discount, if I use it? Or do I have to enter something in extra on top of that? And if we do decide, like Daryl was saying, make it across the board for all transit, including Metro Mobility, will you be working with Human Services in the counties? Because that's where I get my go-to card for Metro Mobility and transit as part of my waiver services. So there's a bigger picture than just what Daryl's talking about that you have to look at, because there's lots of people who get it through the county and still can be independent in the community and use Metro Mobility and the city bus. So if you can answer those questions or the best of your ability, that would be nice. Thank you.
Yep, happy to. So the first question, when you select your rider type, your fare type, and that would determine which fare set you see. So if you were to pick the standard adult, that's the standard regular price fare. Senior, youth, Medicare fares and mobility fares obviously have different fare sets. You would select those. There's no proof needed within the app. There is a pop-up that explains the certain ID that you may need to present if you're asked for it, but we leave that up to the fare inspectors, the bus drivers, and the police department to ask for that request should they deem it needed. But otherwise, you're free to purchase the ticket that you want. As far as the county goes and things like that, that's something this app absolutely can support. That's not my decision to make that happen. That would be a larger fare policy conversation with revenue operations and things like that. I will say that we are currently, to test something out like that, exploring a transit assistance program pilot for this year, hopefully. That would be something where a rider would have to opt in and there would be a validation process and they would see a different fare set than your regular user, offering them those $1 rides that the transit assistance program offers. That's in the works. We're trying to figure out the best way to do that. This is a new service that we didn't really have available to us on the previous app. So that's another great thing that this new vendor brought to us. So I'm hoping, that it's expansive. We just need to make sure we get it right in a pilot and before we kind of start expanding.
All right,
I have one more.
4 minutes for this if folks want to talk or ask more questions. Otherwise, we can move on. Does anybody have any more questions for?
Chair, I have one more question.
Go ahead.
Has Matt announced the new change that happened this morning from Metro Transit? They are dropping all the fares on Metro Transit to $1 from now until the end of October. or and I'm wondering why doesn't that same type of discount apply to Metro Mobility? Because you're impacting the most vulnerable people, but yet their fares don't get reduced. But Metro Transit gets to get reduced fares for 2 months. That sounds a little strange to me. And
This is
I wonder if anybody else has looked at that or heard about that, because the news just made a big announcement about it today.
this is
That-
David.
Carol, I have not heard about that, and I'm glad you brought it up. Thank you.
I'm pretty sure Adam, you don't have an answer to that, but if you want to address it, you can.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have an answer to that.
Okay.
I just I don't have much to do with fair policy other than
And we can bring that back up, Daryl. This is David again. We can bring that back up during member comment too,
Okay, thank you.
so we can chat a little bit about that.
But
Thank you for letting us talk about it.
Oh yeah,
thanks, Matt. Thank you, Chair. Sorry about that.
my pleasure. It's all good. If things come up and you wanna discuss them. Adam, thank you very much.
If there's no more member comment, I did have one question for Adam related to the app.
Go ahead, Andy.
This is Andy. Adam, I'm wondering for people who do use the mobility fare, either through an L on their ID or because they're paratransit certified, does the app allow for some sort of a sign-in or authentication that would allow them to identify themselves without needing to present an ID, so that they can still just show their phone the same way a full fare rider would? Or are they going to need to, in the long term, continue to show a physical ID in addition to their phone?
At this point, that's not how it works. They're just open for anyone to purchase. Obviously, there's some honor system reliance on that. It's certainly something we could do. Again, that maybe be more of a fair policy conversation. It could be handled similar to the tap stuff I discussed earlier, where you could have an authorized list of people. The challenge you would have there, though, is that you would have to have someone take some steps beforehand. You would have to register with us, and we would have to keep you on that list. And if someone wasn't on there, could they still buy one? It might exclude people like travelers who might be eligible or something like that, coming from out of town. And we, it's not a no, or it's not an impossibility. It's just something we could discuss more, and see what the best way to, obviously reducing the barrier of having to show an ID is good. But then what's the trade-off of, does that lock out people who don't register if they're, not a regular rider or something like that? Just would I need to weigh those things is all.
Well, you gotta also remember people from out of town.
All right. Well, I would say that members, if you want to download and try it out, if you have any specific feedback, you can send it to me and I can send it off to Adam. I'm guessing that's something that you would be okay with, Adam.
That would be great.
Perfect. Well,
I
thank you.
just want to say one thing really quickly,
Yeah,
is that
Mm-hmm.
this would be great for people who, come and visit from out of town, and then they can use the app, and I don't have to work on getting, and then they could put the amount that they, if they bring traveling money. So they can come along with like me and Daryl or whoever we're hanging out with, and just have a great time. So this is another way for them to be independent, and I don't have to do all the work.
One thing I'll just add to that too, the nice part about this is, unlike a go-to card where you need to load up money, say put $20 on it or what have you, this is a true pay-as-you-go system. So if you buy your $1 mobility fare, you just have to buy $1 worth of rides. You don't have to say put $10 or $5 on your card and then use it and have stuff left over. To me, that's one of the bigger benefits, especially for folks who maybe don't have a ton of spare cash laying around that they want locked up on a go-to card. I think this is a good benefit for those folks as well.
This is David. Fantastic. Thank you, Adam, and thank you, members, for asking such good questions. Let's go on to John Levin, who will be giving us a little rundown about Metro Transit Strategic Services. I apologize if anybody else can hear that siren. This happens during this meeting. They test their sirens. So I apologize for that. I will mute and I will let John take it away.
Right. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. My name is John Levin. I am the Director of Strategic Initiatives at Metro Transit. I use he, him pronouns and happy to be here today to present. My goal today is really just to provide an overview of the Strategic Initiatives Department at Metro Transit. If we can go to the next slide, please. So Strategic Initiatives has been around since about 2014. It's a relatively new department within Metro Transit. It was really created to address cross-functional challenges and cross-functional ideas within the organization. There's a specific expertise in the department around data and analytics and technology, but that's not our only focus. So on this slide here, you can see that we have a group that focuses on research and analytics, strategic planning, performance management, business technology management, and our shared mobility program. And part of that shared mobility program, you heard Adam describing elements of that earlier, and I'll talk about more in a moment. We can go to the next slide, please. So the committee has actually heard from Strategic Initiative staff before a couple times. One time was from Eric Lind, who's the manager of research and analytics. He presented in August of 2019 on some of the types of data that we have about our transit services and our vehicles and our customers, and how we use that data to inform some of the work that we do. And I think this is a great example of some of the key role of our group and the work that we do. And so one of our focuses is using data to inform the decisions that we make at Metro Transit and the investments that we make with staff and funding resources. And what we're doing is we're taking the raw data that comes out of many of our operational systems, which can be very complex, sometimes difficult to get that data about about vehicle information or passengers or maintenance activities. And we are extracting that data, we're manipulating it, and we are generating it, what I will say is information. So how we can understand how the service is being used, what the experience of our customers are, et cetera. So we're creating that information, but then we really take it the next step, which is really into what I would call performance management, which is, well, how do we measure performance to our goals, our performance, our progress towards our goals? And how can data help us again inform our decisions? And so so if we make a decision, for example, about service design or shelter location or snow clearance and maintenance of our facilities, all of these types of activities, what our group is doing is helping specifically take the data that we have and using that to inform those decisions. And so what Eric presented on a couple of years ago now was, for example, how we use the lift or ramp deployments data and the mobility fare tags, how we use that, for example, in siting of shelter locations and in the maintenance and snow clearance at our facilities in terms of how we prioritize. We also share that information with our partners at the cities, and they can use that data to prioritize their decisions and their investments. So this work around data is a significant piece of the work that our department does. If we can go to the next slide, please. But I will say that we are starting to focus not just on data, but on using other information beyond just the numbers to inform our decisions. And this is really an evolving approach, both within our organization and really across the industry, but really trying to understand what the individual experiences of people are, of our customers and of our employees and of others who interact with our service, um, seeing them not just as numbers, but as people who have an experience with our system. And so this involves a lot of collaboration. And I will say across the entire strategic initiatives department and the work we we do everything in collaboration with other departments. And so a lot of what you'll hear me talk about is the work of other departments that we are supporting. And so this is a great example where we support surveys, we support customer engagement, we support understanding the text, for example, the text that's collected from customer contacts or from surveys, helping use that information to inform decisions and discussions. And so this is, I will say, it's a growing part of our work. It's a more difficult and a different type of work, but I really see this as important for the future of of making good decisions within the organization. If we can go to the next slide, please. So I've mentioned already this idea of performance management, of making sure that we're focusing the actions and decisions that we make on our outcomes. And that is reflected more generally within our department in 3 different efforts that we have underway. The first is around strategic planning. So strategic planning, where you establish what are your goals, your long-term objectives and outcomes that you're trying to achieve, and then what is the work that we want to do as an organization to try to achieve those goals. And so we do strategic planning at an agency level for all of Metro Transit. We also do strategic planning at a department level or a work unit level. Again, just having the conversations about how we connect the work and decisions that we're doing to the outcomes we're trying to achieve. We're working right now on a new strategic plan. I think the hope is to roll that out in the next several months. More details on that. We're finalizing some of the details, but that I think will help provide a very strong sense of where Metro Transit is going in the next few years, and how we think that we'll get there and we'll make progress. Once we've set those goals, and we've identified the work we want to do, the next piece of this connection is measuring and monitoring our performance. Are we making progress towards our goals? We do that at Metro Transit through using a lot of data. We have key performance indicators that we collect and monitor regularly. And we're also starting to set up a little bit more formalized approach to this in our performance teams. It's something that we're just getting off the ground now, but hopefully I can come back and report on that in more detail later. But the idea of performance teams and the idea of performance management generally is that you identify the outcomes you're trying to achieve and then how you want to measure performance towards those outcomes. So what is my measure of, for example, on-time performance, or my measure of providing good customer information, and then collect the data and monitor our progress. Performance is also, though, about identifying the work that we're trying to do. So work that we do to improve customer information, or work that we do to improve on-time performance, and monitoring our progress on that work, what we call the inputs into our work. And so the performance teams will be monitoring, again, both our overall outcomes, our performance, but also monitoring our progress on the actions that we're taking. And the final piece of this effort is communication. So we're communicating our progress not only externally to stakeholders, but also internally. It's really important that all of us as Metro Transit employees understand what we're trying to achieve, understand the work that we're doing, and understand the progress that we're making. And this allows us to work together in a performance-oriented culture. So part of our role in the department is to establish very strong communication about our performance, again, both internally, but also externally. And we are developing, I hope we'll be launching end of this year, early next year, some performance dashboards at Transit that will help the general public see our progress, but also have internal tools to report our progress for staff. We can go to the next slide, please. The last piece I'll talk about is a little less focused on data, but it's really focused on an important part of our work, which is fostering innovation and leveraging technology, and those two tend to go hand in hand. You heard earlier this year, in fact, from Meredith Klakatka in June, and she's the Shared Mobility Program Manager, talking about the microtransit pilot project. So this is a new on-demand service that we'll be piloting. The initial pilot will be in the North Minneapolis area. You can see a general service area in the bottom picture, but it's roughly bounded by I-94 on the east, I-394 on the south, Golden Valley Road and Broadway on the north, and Theodore Wirth Parkway on the west. And this will be a service, so we had hoped to launch in the fall of this year. We've had some difficulties with the contracting and getting everything set up, so we're planning to launch the service now in the spring of next year, 2022. I will say the delay is actually allowing us to do things a little differently than we originally planned, and I think it will ultimately be a better service. But this microtransit service is just a great example of leveraging the innovations that are occurring in the industry, bringing those to bear locally to solve our challenges and to achieve our goals of increasing mobility options, which is one of our goals, and increasing the connectivity with the fixed route network and the other significant investment that we've made in fixed route services in the region. So again, we'll be launching that microtransit service pilot, but really it's a great example. It really, the microtransit again is a intersection of what I would say are two broader efforts. So the first, as I said, is leveraging new modes, what's going on in the industry, providing more options. Part of that work of leveraging new technologies and new modes is minimizing the negative impacts and minimizing barriers to those new services. So part of our conversation around microtransit is making sure it's accessible to all. And part of our conversation generally about shared mobility, which includes things like bikes and scooters that Adam mentioned, is making sure that those services don't impede the movement of others who are using the transportation system. So lots of conversations about, again, leveraging new ideas, but also mitigating the negatives of them. The second piece of the shared mobility work is around technology, or I should say, the second element to this is around technology and technology innovation. And so part of the role of our group is to try to make sure that innovation that occurs in the industry or innovation that we're creating, that we're doing those projects effectively and efficiently, and bringing and really monitoring their whether they work. There's some words on the screen here, the IRA project and beacons and enunciators. These again are not projects that my department is leading, but the department, I think they're good examples of us as an organization bringing new technology to bear to meet our needs. And they're the types of projects that I want my department to help us do more of in the future and to facilitate new ideas. If we can go to the next slide, please. I think that's the end. So this has really just been a quick summary of the work that when you hear strategic initiatives at Metro Transit, you'll know the work that we do, which is around, again, around data, around analytics, and around performance measurement, around shared mobility, and around innovation and leveraging new technology. So with that, happy to answer any questions that the committee might have.
This is Claudia.
Go ahead, Claudia.
This may not be part of the thing here, but I do have a question about respect. Do you have any plans for the future for kind of something about respect for passengers, especially folks with disabilities, for people to move, and then also the respect to the passengers and the bus drivers? Because I've been seeing a lot of crap going on lately on the buses that are not respecting the passengers or the drivers. And the drivers always seem to get in trouble for trying to protect the passengers. So I don't know if that's part of the future or not. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairing Committee, I certainly hope it's part of the future as a regular transit rider myself, and not so much in COVID trying to reduce the demand, but before and after a rider of many of our services, I agree that the sense of feeling like you belong and feeling like that others around you respect your presence is critical. Um, so I wouldn't say that that's a specific area of my department's work, but I do know at Metro Transit that's a critical question that we have right now. So we have worked in the past on a variety of efforts to increase the awareness of the importance of respect uh, and just kind of create a more welcoming environment on transit. But I also know that that's a focus now moving forward looking to the future of bringing on additional staff onto the system to increase the formal staff presence on our vehicles, in particular light rail, but I think across the system as one tool to try to make sure that we have a welcoming environment for everybody. And so I'm not going to, I won't speak in great detail, and there's probably others at Transit who can speak in more detail to that question. And I think it would be great probably to have them come and talk about that work. But I will just say, I know that that is very much on the minds of folks at Transit and something that we're working hard on.
Thank you.
This is David. That leads into my question. So what determines what lands on your plate, or what determines what data points you are taking into consideration?
Well, I will say this, in some ways, some of what falls on our plate depends that we act a little bit as an internal consulting group. And so a lot of the work that we do is being done by others in the organization. But oftentimes when things become a more difficult project or a more complex project, we'll be asked to assist because we have the staff with the technical expertise to work on the more difficult challenges. That's particularly on the data side. When it comes to the strategic plan and the performance teams, part of what our work is to again is to really coordinate to create the big picture plan and vision for that work, but then to bring all the voices from across the organization into the picture. So if your question is, well, how do we decide what what our goals are? How do we decide how we're going to measure our performance? Those are questions that we're bringing other staff to the table on, and ultimately asking leadership, saying, well, this is staff's perspective. Perhaps we've also gathered information from our external stakeholders, and then asking leadership to agree that that's how we want to measure our performance moving forward. So I don't know if I answered your question, but um, our role is to create the space within which we can have that conversation and bring forward the decisions.
Yeah, I mean, so what this is David again. It sounds like it's kind of capacity building and then collaboration. These are kind of jargony nonprofit words that I'm using, but
Very much so, because these are the type, we are at our core, we're Metro Transit is a transit operating organization. We purchase and maintain and operate buses and trains, and so sometimes when you're doing something beyond that, you need to build that capacity for that other type of work. And so that is a significant portion of what our group is doing, is making sure that we are able to do the types of activities that are critical, but that may not be what you think of as your traditional transit operations functions.
do any other members have questions for John?
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I had a question.
Go ahead, Eric, and then
It's a
I'll
little more
go to Heidi.
I guess it gets a little more into some of the specifics, but watching the presentation, I was curious on kind of what strategic initiatives are being looked into using the data-driven approach to improve accessibility, and what data points, either quantitative or qualitative, are used for those types of initiatives focused on transit accessibility.
Well, I will say that some of the work that we've done in the past and have reported on, particularly, for example, around really trying to understand where um, those who use mobility fares, or those who are using the ramps and the lifts to access our vehicles, where they are using the system. So the geographic perspective and then maybe time of day as well. Making sure that information is informing other decisions that we're making is a significant example of how we've achieved that. And so we create a regular data set with that information combined, those two data sets combined. We provide that to our facilities planning and facilities maintenance groups, as well as to our city partners, so that to inform the decisions. And we also then help with the conversation. Well, how best do we use that data to make those decisions? I'll say one other group we provided it to is the group that's working on station siting locations for the bus rapid transit, for example. And so we've also helped them with the analytical question of, well, what's the best way to inform the decisions with that data? So we will get into the weeds with kind of how do you merge that data in with all the other kind of data that we're looking at for making those decisions. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but certainly those that data has been an important part of it. I'm sure there are other examples, and if there's other questions that folks think we should be looking at, I'm certainly happy to help with that. I know that part of the work that we do in our group is looking at what we refer to as access to destinations. So it's using the word accessibility a little bit differently, but it's where can you get to using the fixed route transit network. And part of what we've looked at there is making sure we're looking at a variety of different destinations that people may want to get to. And so medical facilities, for example, is a good example, or shopping is a good example. So that's an example, not specifically looking at accessibility or mobility users, but trying to look very broadly at how people are using the transit system uh, to reach a variety of different destinations, because I think that's a really important piece, is recognizing that people are using the system for a lot of different trip purposes and trying to make those work effectively. So again, I'm not sure I answered your full question, but happy to take another go at it if I missed it.
Thank you, Eric. This is David. That was a really good question, and it I think it's prompting me to ask another question, but I will stew on it for a little bit and give other members some time to ask questions. Do any other members have questions for John?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead,
Mine
Abby.
is due on data of maintenance, and I was wondering because in West St. Paul there is a shelter, and it's been more than 2 months since the glass has been replaced. It's been damaged. So, do you look at data and how much shelters and buses and ramps and certain things get checked? Or are they just like? Because I know COVID right now might be slowing down some things, like it might be hard to get glass, but does the data show that you have a really certain problem in certain areas of maintenance? Like in the wintertime, is it shoveling in front of the bus stops, correctly, so wheelchairs can get to it? And I was just wondering, if you look at maintenance as data, because that's real important, because then you don't end up putting more money into the system when you might be able to fix it in other ways. And it will help the people with disabilities, because then they can help you guys formulate other ways to save money too.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for the great question. I know the presentation isn't up right now, but one of the slides that I showed had an image of a graph, and it had an image of a couple customer comments. And those are actually specifically information about shelter condition. If we can go, I think it was slide 4 or 5, go one earlier. Thank you very much, Jason. So this slide shows our customer relations dashboard, which is an internal tool that we use so that staff across the organization have access to not just the individual comments that are made from our customers, but can see them as data, can see how many complaints or contacts we get about certain issues. And it's not shown on this, but we can also map those. So there's a geographic component to those. We also can see the detail. The bottom of the screen shows specific texts that were coming from the phone call with a customer. So our group is helping to get access to this data. We created this tool so that people could see the data much more easily and see it in aggregate, not just as individual contacts. But certainly then if there's departments that say we would like to do more analysis of when or how incidents occur, or how long does it take to repair, we certainly would engage and support those types of questions. Again, a lot of this has to come from the business, and a lot of it has to come from our strategic planning and performance management activities to identify where we're going to focus. So we come at this from several different angles, but I think fundamentally my answer is yes, we're using maintenance information as data. We're using that data to inform the decisions that we're making around staffing and around the work that we do. As you suggest, it doesn't always mean that things get fixed as quickly as they should. And I know that getting glass has been an issue in terms of getting on the supply chain, but it's really important for us not to lose track of those issues and try over time to improve our performance. And again, that's what our group is about.
David, I have a question.
All right, I'll go to Ken and then Trevor and then Richard. Take it away, Ken.
Yeah, so I apologize. I entered into the tail end of your conversation. I joined in late, but something that you were responding to in previous answers tripped a question in my mind. And you mentioned the fact that one of the features you serve as, your group serves as, is sort of a consultant-ish kind of approach and bringing the right people to the table to help direct the dialogue that's taking place. One issue that we seem to experience time and time again is the fact that decisions have been made about a pending route location, bus stop location, BART location, and then we are presented with a concept that is complex and difficult in terms of accessibility to that particular location. My question relates to, is there capacity or opportunity in having those types of discussions about trying to develop criteria for identifying appropriate locations for future stations, if that could involve people with disabilities or somebody from our committee so that we could have some input in helping make the decision about where a station goes instead of then the decision being made based on not having our input and then having the challenge of us trying to require or push or force extra costs related to making that initial decision a safer option for people with disabilities.
Well, I will say I'm a little out of my depth in terms of what's happened in the past, in terms of the how the sequencing, the timing of those past efforts. I think what you say makes sense, and I think that I know that it is overall is an effort of our organization to make sure that we are kind of doing genuine engagement on the front end of projects, whether it's with the general public or with our advisory committees or with policymakers, doing that genuine engagement on the front end to inform the discussions and the decisions that are being made. I can't speak to the specific issue or the specific recent projects, but um, I think that's I think where my group, kind of the intersection with my group, is that when those questions come up and we want to put some measurable, some numbers behind it, I think that's where we've come into play. So I do know that, for example, as we think about the bus rapid transit stop locations and staff is trying to look at potential locations, the data about where there are mobility pass boardings or where there's ramp deployments, that data is part of what informs uh, the initial planning that goes into that work. What I can't speak to is what happens is I think the engagement part that you're asking about, and the committee's input into that process. I'm really not as well prepared to address that.
Okay, and just a follow up, I don't want to imply that we're not being part of the engagement. We are, and we really appreciate that. And it has spurred some really interesting conversations and oftentimes multiple conversations. My concern is that I realize that you deal in data and data points, and sometimes looking at existing data points, as you've mentioned, the pattern of people previously using a particular location with a disability is part of the process and an important part of the process, but it's not the end all be all part of the process, because if that site gets developed based on criteria that was given previously of how it was used before, does not allow, if it's not built accessibly, does not allow then for a person with a disability to use that spot in the future. And that really curtails the usability for somebody. And I just noticed that when we are engaged, oftentimes we're engaged after decisions have been made about accessibility, and then we bring in the perspective from the engagement perspective of why that may or may not be a good idea from a safety issue, from a person with a disability perspective, a mobility issue. And oftentimes that then has to change, and that creates some additional cost in restructuring, redeveloping, re-employing ideas that if there was some way to develop the concept of inclusion of the data that may not be a point that's already been measured earlier on in the process, that might help reduce some expenditures and costs and get us to a more streamlined system. It's just a thought. I just want to
Well,
pass it
I
on.
really appreciate the comment. I understand. I don't know if you were here for the slide I had, which said we use data, but we don't always only use data,
Okay.
because
Okay.
I think that was the what you just said is exactly the point.
Right.
Individuals' lived experience and understanding of complex situations is sometimes as important or more important than the data. And as you say, the past data versus the future knowledge that we have. So it's a great point. Um, and it is something that we're trying to do better, both from a kind of an analytic side from my perspective, but also I know something that I think we are striving to do better at as an organization on the engagement side. And again, I can't speak directly to the engagement
Yeah.
piece, so it's not my group's
Yeah.
work, but I understand the issue you're raising. I think it's a great point.
Thank you. Thank you.
Trevor.
Yeah, thanks for presenting. I was curious about the micro transit program that you mentioned. Is that something that would be, equatable to, Uber Pool or Lyft shared rides program or anything like that? Is just like a on demand and, it goes on a route or it travels and it's based on a computer, it picks up passengers based on like similar requests and things like that?
Yeah, I think it's there's similarities to the Uber Pool and the Lyft line that these shared ride on-demand services. I think a difference would be that the micro transit services are micro from a couple perspectives. One is the vehicle is smaller, but also the service area is smaller. So we are going to operate, excuse me, in a 2 to 3 square mile service area, and really not outside that area. And so we will provide point-to-point service, so somebody can say, I'm here and I want to go there, and we will schedule those rides, picking up multiple people along the way. So there may be multiple people in the vehicle going different places, but we won't take you anywhere in the region. We'll just take you to the one air service area, and then it's also um, a different vehicle. So a lot of the times those services are smaller vehicles. We'll be using, at least for this pilot, we'll be using retired 10 10 passenger cutaway vehicles. And then also, fare is going to be great. Fare is going to be hard to beat because it'll be a regular transit fare for the service with a transfer to fixed route, which I think is going to generally be a better fare than you'd get on some of the private services.
And when you say you have micro regions, you'll have multiple micro regions that cover the entire metro area, and then you just have to stay within your. So, if, like,
This,
for example, in my case, if I live in downtown Minneapolis and I just need to get to the light rail stop so I can go all the way to St. Paul, I could just use this, get me to the light rail, and then take it over. So it kind of like helps you get through your neighborhood, especially if your neighborhood is less serviced.
yeah, so I mean, I guess the answer would be this is a pilot, so this is going to be one service area. Um, in a very big region we'll cover one area. Our hope is that we would identify other areas in the region. I don't think our plan is to cover the entire region. And we do still have transit link service that is general public dial ride where we don't have fixed route service. But I don't think our plan is to cover the entire region. I think our plan is to cover those areas that have specific um, benefit from a mobility perspective or specific gaps, for example, in the fixed route service we want to try to fill in a new way. So um, but it remains to be seen. It obviously will require funding to implement these services. So right now, the purpose of the pilot is to see how does it operate? Do people understand it? How does it fit within our system? Hopefully, once we get through the pilot, we get feedback from customers. We see how it operates. We can then make some decisions about where we would expand that service into other areas. So, and that'll be, some hard decisions to make about where we would see the most benefit. So I can't commit that we would, have it covering your specific neighborhood or any specific neighborhood, but certainly we want to make sure we focus the service where it does the most benefit.
This is David, and Trevor, I can chat with you more offline about the pilot project. It was introduced to us a couple months ago. I think maybe you weren't here. But we'll have them back once they have more information on what the on-demand pilot project is. Richard.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I had a question about, has there been any research or gathering of data that you're aware of in regards to the transportation needs of the senior population? And one of the things that made me think about it was I live in Roseville. There's been an explosion of senior housing here. I don't know if that equates to more need for transit. How many of those people would use transit or still use their own cars? But there certainly hasn't been any increase that I've observed in transit options for people that live here. And I guess my question is just around that.
Yeah, I know we have not done specific research. I know we've looked at research that others have done in the area of senior transportation. I don't think we've done anything specific, and somebody may correct me after I'm done here, but I will maybe just echo the challenge that you raised, which is that land use decisions and development decisions often are being made um, uh, disconnected from transportation network resources and decisions. And so when we say that public transportation is a great option for those who don't drive, and then you have senior facilities going in, there's not great public transportation. There seems to be a disconnect there. And I'm speaking a little bit less as in my formal role and more just as a transit supporter and advocate within the organization. So I may be more admiring the problem that you're identifying and saying it definitely is an issue. And I don't know that we have great data, but it's actually a question that, I'm thinking as I'm talking here, it's a question that we perhaps could apply some analytical resources to and ask the question, where is that development occurring and what is the level of transit that's nearby? So yeah, I'm thinking as we go here, and I appreciate the question because I think it may actually inspire some interesting research we could do in the future.
Well,
I
thank
have
you.
I have another question if I can ask it.
Yep, go ahead, Heidi. I like where this discussion is going. Just real quickly, let me say something. And I think that maybe sometime in the next year we have John back and maybe get more into the weeds on some of this stuff because it sounds like members are quite interested in data, both data that is collected and maybe data that should be collected. But take it away, Heidi, and I'll leave it open for one more person after Heidi if they want to pose a question or make a comment. So go ahead, Heidi.
My question is, do you look at old data and new data? So sometimes you don't repeat yourself, or look at maybe some old data has some really good stuff and the newer stuff doesn't have, because sometimes, the past can tell you some things about the future that you don't want to repeat, or maybe you do need to repeat. Do you have that record, Because sometimes somewhere along the way there might have been a good idea, but it never really got off the table. Because I remember in the early 2000s mostly in the 90s, we were cutting transportation left and right for the community. If it wasn't Metro Mobility, it was the city bus, and then you would put it in places where a lot of people couldn't use it. So do you look at that stuff so we can make good decisions in the future to help you guys, not only for people without disabilities or very little disability, but the whole community. So the elderly, the disabled, the blind, the deaf people, every population, even people coming into the United States, because of the war, so they can learn too. So just, do you look at that kind of stuff?
Well, I think the short answer is part of what we do in our group is try to find as much data as we can that we think will be useful and relevant to the question at hand. And so we do have a lot of historical data. We have great historical data about our service that we've offered over the years and about the ridership that we've had. Um, we also collect new data, and some of the data we have, the newer data we have, is much better data. So for example, we're collecting better and better data about the demographics of the riders of the system. So we do the onboard through the travel behavior inventory and the onboard transit survey. We collect data about not just who, where people want to travel, where they get on and off, but what's their trip purpose and some of the demographic information about them. And so that the more and more information we have, specifically around demographics, we can apply that data to the decisions that we're making. We don't always have the best data in the past, but we have much better data now. So
Is
I
it
would say
because
that
of technology? Because our
because of technology,
technology's
and
gotten
also
better, so you can, archive it even better or figure a new way to do it. So is technology helping a part of that?
technology helps, but I also think what we're doing is we're asking better questions. We're understanding that we need to, if we want to know something, we've got to ask. And so we're doing a better job with designing our surveys, with asking the right questions that are actually going to be useful um, to to make decisions. So one of the roles of my group that I mentioned was around survey. We do surveys. We do a lot of work helping others design good surveys and implement good surveys and analyze their survey data to make sure that when somebody says, I want to do a survey to understand some travel demand, for example, making sure that it's a good survey and we'll be able to answer the questions that we're really asking. So for example, if we want to understand how seniors or people with different mobility challenges are traveling in the system, let's make sure that we're asking the right questions so that we can address that. So I don't have a specific example because I think there's a lot of examples, but I just think it partly technology and having lots of data, but it's partly also, really being smart about how we approach those questions. And Chair, to your comment about coming back, be happy to come back. I would probably bring with me some of the staff who actually do the detail, analytical and conceptual work here because they would be able to answer these questions probably better than I can too.
One other thing I want to say real quickly, when you were talking about data, do you have people on your committee that actually live it every day, like elderly people, disabled people, kind of like, or the people from around the world, so they can tell you how your data sucks or how it works or if it's really good or if it's really making a difference?
Well, I will say that it is one of the challenges of my staff that we don't have a ton of diversity. I wish we had more within our staff. So because we don't, I think we understand that. And one of our goals is to make sure that we are reaching out more on the front end, as this was an earlier comment, on the front end to make sure that we understand broad perspectives of what we're trying to achieve. And so I think part of the benefit of coming here to this meeting and introducing myself is I think it opens up options for future conversations. And I said I've heard some really good questions today that are spurring thoughts of mine about the work that we might do as a group. So I, unfortunately, from a staff level, I can't say that we have all the right, the full diversity that we would benefit from. But I think your committee and other groups like your committee are really important resource for us to help us understand how we should focus our work.
Can I, Mr. Chair, can I just say one quick comment?
You can wrap us up, Eric.
All right. It's when you were speaking to Richard about that topic of land use and being able to identify that kind of stuff and build it into your strategic initiatives and finding the data. Just want to throw out that I would recommend looking at 2040 comp plans for cities. They all have really good data and write-ups about that kind of stuff. So if that was to get on your radar, it'd be a good place to start.
Appreciate the comment.
I had one more comment. This is Patty Thorson. I'm wondering if you have anything, you talked about seeking feedback from stakeholders. I'm wondering if you have anything in that area where you had a question, like a checklist for yourself. Are there people with disabilities what people with disabilities and types of disabilities are involved in the evaluation of whatever you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. The thing I just want to be clear on is that some of the decisions that are actually being made, and some of the, so therefore I think um, the dividing, thinking about different subpopulations is work that's being done outside of our group by some of the operational groups and planning
Certainly.
groups. So I honestly, I can't speak to what they do because I'm maybe not
Sure.
familiar enough with it and how they look at those questions. I'm sure they do, but I can't say it.
Okay.
I just know that what we really are able to help doing is when the data exists, is really help to answer the questions that they have. But I'm not giving you a very satisfactory answer because I'm not sure I
No,
know the answer.
I've been very excited by your presentation, and I look forward to talking with you again. And I'm intrigued too by the seniors comment that are exploring that further. So thank you very much.
This is David. Thank you very much, John. I think it was a robust discussion. I'm glad we went over a little bit because I think we got some more good stuff there. Thank you. And we will move on to Doug, who's going to give us updates on priority seating.
Okay, hello everybody. So actually, I'm going to talk about two things here. First, priority seating, and then some upcoming outreach that we're going to be doing starting next week. So priority seating has been an issue with this committee for a long time, and there's been a lot of frustrations. And recently, beginning of this year, we formed a group formed out of TAC that got together and we discussed the issues and kind of pinpointed two initiatives going forward. One was to inform the public, and the other was to have better training for our operators. So as far as informing the public, we decided to do a series of videos, which we, in the end, we're going to be doing one video, but it's going to show disabilities from show the standpoint of boarding the bus and using the priority seating from the various types of disabilities from their standpoint. And that is going to be happening actually quite soon. It's going to see September 14th is going to be a video shoot, as well as well, if we get it all done on the 14th, then it'll be good to go. But on the 15th, we're going to save that day for if we need to do some additional shooting. I did have a list of volunteers that volunteered for that. And I had 7 individuals. And I wanted to thank those that got back to me with that availability for the 14th to do that. I did send out an email to the others, and I'm still waiting for their response. So I'm going to call you out a little bit on that. Just get in touch with me, and then we can figure out what we can do as far as other individuals that need to be included in the video. What was I going to say? So it's going well. Also for the instructional part for our operators, so I teach all our operators customer service. Basically, I see all our new operators, and so I've included that in my class in the past, but they're kind of breaking it up into 2 sections now. And so part of my first section that I see the drivers, we're including that, and then in the second phase of seeing me for customer service, we're going to be also including it again. And so it's gonna be a reinforcing thing because drivers, they forget and they need retraining. And that's also going to be going out into the garages in some kind of form in the future too. So we're kind of working on that too. So the big thing now is the priority seating video. It sounds pretty cool. The script got written and reviewed, and I think everybody's on board with how we're going to do that. It's going to be entertaining, but informative as well for the public, and for me to use in my how to ride and for my operator trainings as well. Any questions on that?
This is Heidi.
Yep.
I have an important question I wanted to ask. and this happens in human services and social services. You know, when human services builds a program, they don't do a good job of sending it out. So are you going to have a, like each garage, you know, when they have to do training, you know, all over the Twin Cities, are you going to have a very strict guideline? This is how you got to follow it, and this is how you got, so no matter what bus or train we get on, everything is working the way you're telling us today or talking about, like you were hope, you know, that the working group put together?
Mhm. So right now we do have a strict procedure that they have to follow. It's just that the instructional piece that we're going to enhance is going to reinforce that and kind of not just so right now it's a procedure, it's in a book, it's text. Okay, do this, 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 and this. There's no human component to that. So what I do in my class is we bring up stories, and we have pictures, and we have videos, so that it brings in that human aspect, and so then it's easier, it's better retained for the operators, and so they're more willing to remember that and they understand it. So we want them to empathize with people. So we want them to walk a mile in their moccasins or whatever you want to call it, in their shoes. And so that's the piece we're trying to bring into it a
So
little bit more.
it doesn't matter what garage let's say I get transferred to another garage and I
Yeah.
have to go through the training again. I will, I won't
Same.
say, oh, I was over in that garage and they told me this and now you're telling me that. So
No.
what happened here?
Yeah,
So it's not going to be that kind of thing?
it's always the
You know?
exact same training. They'll all have the
Okay.
same training. If there is an alteration in the training, it won't be in the training, it'll be in the operator themselves. And so that operator, if they go outside of that procedure, then that's where you call customer relations, and we can get involved and we can get that driver talked to by their manager and retrained.
I just wanted to say that because that's happened in other types of services or training,
Yep.
you know, in the system where you go from one place to another and then everyone's got a different way of doing it.
No,
So
we have
I
we
didn't
have
know if you're going to
Yep.
keep it very straightforward
Yep.
and no matter where you get transferred and because we want to keep the drivers. I know you're
Correct.
at a shortage right now, and this is a good way to do it if you stay on top of it and say, no more of this stuff, just do the training and let's move forward.
Yep, you're exactly right.
I have a question.
Anybody else?
David.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, Doug, I know that you're focusing on the priority seating campaign related to the video component of presenting to the public, but we also identified a print campaign, posters, and other print materials to also address the same priority seating concepts. Can you give a little update on where we are with that?
Yes, you are correct. Unfortunately, I'm not the person to talk to about that. That would be Angela Olsen in the marketing department, and she's not on this call right now. But we could definitely bring her in next time, or
Okay.
I can have her send an email out to everyone.
Sure, that would be
Yep.
great. I'm assuming they're both proceeding along at the same level. So I thought if you knew something about that, it would be great to update us. But I
Yep.
understand. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yep. Okay.
Does
Anybody else?
anybody else have questions? All right, I see no hands up.
Okay.
Thank you, Doug. Go
Oh,
ahead.
I just want to bring up one more thing. So next week, there is going to be a outreach effort for the downtown St. Paul area. So starting next year, there's going to be some construction starting downtown, and then a year after, and then up until 2025. So on Wabasha, Minnesota, and Roberts, and that's going to affect a lot of our bus routes. So a lot of routes, 3 routes from Wabasha are going to move over to Minnesota for a year, and then when Minnesota construction starts, they're going to move over to Roberts. Then after all is said and done, we're deciding with the city's help if we want to move all the routes that we did move prior, the ones that are on Minnesota and Wabasha now, to Minnesota, or leave them all on Roberts. So then it'd either be one or the other, and we're going to be starting a campaign next week, survey that people can take and let us know their feedback as far as what their preference would be. So I'm going to be sending out information on that to all of you anyways. I just kind of wanted to give you a heads up what that's all about.
So how are you going to reach the disability community? Because there's a lady who works at the airport who's disabled, and when they were going to make changes, she needed to learn how to do all that. She read the sign that you guys posted where the bus stop was, but then she has to do all the processing of figuring that out because she still wants to work at the airport, and make money like anybody else. So how do we get the word out in different ways?
Right. So this is specifically for the downtown.
It was downtown. She was
Oh,
taking the
oh,
54 into St. Paul and getting off
correct.
right
And so
down the heart of St. Paul because she had gotten from the airport, and I had to tell her there's websites and there's different
yeah.
ways to do it. But how does the public get to learn all what you're talking about?
So the 54 will not be affected by this. So the routes that will be affected by is the Route 3, the Route 16, the Route 67, 62. I'm missing one here, and Route 75. Basically the ones that are running down Minnesota and Waukesha right now. The 54 will not be affected by that. And how are we reaching out? We're doing social media, we're doing emails, we're doing rider alerts, people that subscribe to our rider alerts. There's being postings on all the bus stops. So if you're using our bus stops, it's always posted there. We're going to be doing downtown in-person surveying and information, handing out some flyers, which I'll be sending to you guys. And so you guys, for all the organizations you're in touch with, you can then repost or resend the information that I'm going to send you to any disability organization out there. That would be super helpful. But yeah,
And
so
are you going to do training with the people when we call in if we need to be at a certain time? Like I don't know if I can leave that time, so I call transit and then they understand all the changes
sure.
too.
Yep. So when changes are made, so this is going to be until next spring until they're going to move those routes over to Minnesota from Wabasha. So when that happens, all our transit information and marketing people will know all about that information. And so when you call, they'll have all that there, just like any change that we have in the system. But what we're looking for is feedback. Do you want things on Minnesota? Do you want things all on Robert? Or a mix of the two? So that's kind of what the ask is. All right.
Okay, this is David. Does anybody else have any questions for Doug? Thank you, Doug, very
All right.
much.
Thank you.
On to Andy Strezik with our Metro Mobility online booking update. Take it away.
Hey folks, chair, members of the committee, how are people doing today? I am going to just give some background on our app for online trip booking, where we are, where we're at in terms of current usage, and what is to be done. So I will start by saying those of you who have been certified for long enough may recall that we had an old version of online trip booking years ago. We ended up needing to take that down because an incident occurred where someone logged in using their own login info and found themselves looking at someone else's account. And the folks who owned that particular version were never able to tell us why that was and weren't able to recreate it. So obviously, given that Metro Mobility data is private, we needed to take that down until they could figure out why that happened, and they never did. So we ended up kind of starting from scratch with our goals being to do everything with regard to accessibility and usability that the old one did, plus be secure, be mobile friendly, and then kind of app-based version in a world where people are using their phones and tablets mostly for that kind of thing, and allow for the booking of standby rides outside the ADA service community for trips to be put on standby. For those of you who remember the old version, you may recall that that was for ADA service area only, and if you tried to book a ride Outside of the ADA service area, it just told you to call into reservations. We were testing in a test environment with some customers in the middle of last year for several months. And by late October, on October 24th, I think we started to see testers book their first real rides live on the system. And then after a couple of months of that, in January, we rolled out sort of a soft rollout to everybody publicly, where they could register to use online trip booking if they wanted to. So I looked at rides by real users, not just our test ones that staff did. But if I look at real users' rides from October 24th of last year, when some testers started to be able to book real rides, up through yesterday, we've had 7,307 rides within the ADA service area and an additional 3,077 non-ADA rides booked online. What I like about those numbers is that is roughly the same percentage of our typical ridership. The relationship between ADA and non-ADA there in the bookings pretty much mirrors our relationship ADA to non-ADA in terms of overall trips booked, which tells me that it is usable for folks outside the ADA service area. Again, that being one of our goals to improve on from the last version, and that we are seeing roughly the same percentage breakdown as we are for reservations calls. One of the things you can do besides booking rides is, of course, cancel your rides online if you don't want to sit and wait on hold, or if you've got a standing order so you don't have to book your rides, but you want to call and cancel. And we've seen 2,654 rides within the ADA service community canceled online and 1,305 non-ADA rides canceled. With regard to testing for accessibility, as we were kind of putting together the site and testing it, we used our contract with WECO to take a look at that and go over it, in addition to our own internal testing, and of course then use the customer feedback that we got through testing. Through WECO, we kind of reordered the menu drop down, fixed some things for folks who can't use a mouse. So for keyboard only navigation and compatibility. And then in customer feedback, we changed some alt text labels, kind of took out things that might have made sense if you are a web developer in terms of what it would mean. But otherwise, if you hover over a box, it said something that sounded an awful lot like gobbledygook to someone. So trying to put all that in plain language for anybody to be able to understand in the alt text. The other neat thing that came out there is that through that testing, we found some buttons that we didn't even really know existed. They were what looked like maybe just an icon or something was actually a button, and we never knew that as sighted users until someone was actually tabbing through it with a screen reader, and they came across this thing, and then we had to go and try to find where they were and what they were looking at. So that helped familiarize us and get things improved. And then certainly the biggest thing that came out of our testing was that we learned that users who were using a screen reader, when they tried to add a PCA or guest to their ride, it was just freezing on the most current web browsers. So the new version of Edge or the new version of Chrome, it would just lock. And if they were using still Internet Explorer or Firefox, it was going through fine. And what we ended up learning was that it was actually an issue with JAWS itself, where JAWS wasn't playing nice with the most up-to-date screen readers. We were able to reach out to them, and that got resolved on their end. We were kind of up and running from there. Um, since launch at this point, I'm pleased to say that I haven't gotten any negative feedback with regard to accessibility itself, with regard to contrast, or much with regard to ease of use. Most of the feedback we've gotten has been positive. Um, there are still a couple things that we need to do, I think, that have come up from comments. That we do have meetings set up with Trapeze to try to um, address. One of them is that if you book a ride with an appointment time, and this is true whether you book it on the phone with a reservationist or if the trip is initially booked online, you will have no way of knowing that it has an appointment time other than talking to a human reservationist. You're booking neither on the automated phone system nor on the PassWeb online trip booking software does it say any place, you've got an appointment time of 6 o'clock. It just shows your negotiated pickup time, not the appointment time that drove that negotiated pickup time. So the only way for a rider to currently confirm that that's in is to call and talk to a human. We would like that to be addressed so we can just put that line right into that booking. So when you go online and look at your calendar, click on that ride, it'll say, here's your negotiated pickup time. This ride has an appointment time of 6 o'clock. The other piece of feedback we've heard is that for some users, it's overwhelming for them to look at their calendar and see all of their canceled rides. We have a variety of customers with a variety of disabilities, and oftentimes the same people who get overwhelmed emotionally and frustrated with seeing all those rides and find that difficult to navigate are some of the same customers who frequently call and cancel a lot of rides because they've changed their mind or because their disability is fluctuating or they're triggered in a way that requires them to cancel a lot. So we also understand that some of our customers want to see all their canceled rides so that they can take a look at what they had booked and make sure that nothing was accidentally canceled in error, etc. So right now, anything on their file shows up in that calendar online, 100% of the cancels. We would like the option for a customer to essentially be able to filter the view, where maybe by default it does not show canceled rides, but you'd have the option in the calendar to show those upon request. The one thing we are talking about taking out for everybody that's currently showing up in there is cancel errors. Those are things where the reservationist cancels a ride because they either screwed up, they either misbooked it or double booked it and caught it and canceled it, or they're midway through a booking and then the customer changes their mind at that point. So the ride never actually exists as a true ride. It's aborted before it gets to that point. Those are called cancel errors, and they show up in people's calendars. I don't think there's a good reason to have those there. So we are talking about hiding those from view for everybody and checking to see if that's possible. I'm really impressed with the ridership so far and the usage on this. I think it's a great story, partially because given the pandemic, we've been pretty silent on it. We put something out briefly in the newsletter and that was about it. We have not done a mailing, which is something we would have done in a more typical environment. We didn't do a big listserv blast beyond just, the newsletter. And the reason for that, quite frankly, is that we don't still want to promote a lot of unnecessary ridership. We want to try to encourage the possibility of physical distancing as much as possible. Up until recently, when we got rid of healthcare worker rides, we were right around 100% of our normal capacity with a very diminished driver pool. So we really weren't looking for anything that was going to possibly trigger a big increase or sort of back to what would be traditional ridership plus all those healthcare worker rides. So we haven't done a lot of advertising around this, and the adoption rate has been significant. The success rate for people's use and satisfaction rate has been very good. Um, so I think it's a good story overall. Certainly, if people are interested in doing it, you can call customer service and they'll set you up with a password. The link is just, or the site is available right at metromobility.org in the book a ride section. You'll see it right there. So I think that is most of what I have. I do want to say I got to hop off right at 2:30, so I want to get this out as part of this presentation. I was privy to some of those discussions around paratransit not being included in the reduced fare for the next 2 months. So if people want to know the Metropolitan Council's view on that and why that led there, I'd be happy to speak to that briefly.
Yeah.
If
Andy,
that's something people would like.
Yeah.
Andy, this is a Vice Chair Daryl, and I just have two quick questions for you. One being I use the automated service on my voicemail on my phone. Tried to cancel the ride, it did not get canceled. Then I had to call in and speak to a live person in order for it to get canceled. And then the other thing, well, I just forgot what it was. It just popped into my head. Shoot. It had to do with the fare reduction, but maybe somebody else will bring it up if they have questions.
This is David. Do any other members have questions? Or Andy? Very surprised.
I have a question. This is Heidi.
Go ahead, Heidi.
Does it, when you go in and do all this, is it set up really easy for a person who has processing? I mean, the reason I gave thumbs up is because I really like how you're trying really hard to clean it up. That I am amazed, because I mean, we need to take you and put you in other services because they do not think of that, but is it easy for somebody to set it up, if you got very little to help in your life and you have processing problems, like in reading and understanding? Because you said I got to call them at the, at the Metro Mobility to get that password. And then I don't know how they're going to give me that password. So I first got to write that down correctly and then do all the steps. Can you walk us through that a little? Because you did an excellent job in telling us how you cleaned it up.
Yeah, Heidi, Chair Finley, members of the committee, I'm very pleased at how easy it is. It's one of the things I've been asking people for feedback about. And for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, I've heard some really good things, both in terms of setting up passwords and logging into the system. Your username to log in is always your Metro Mobility ID number. So most of our riders know that. A lot of our riders have it committed to memory. And even if they don't, they've got it on an ID card, a lot of them, or have it written down someplace handy. And the password, even though we are setting you up with it out of the service center initially, you can make it up and give it to us. You can tell us what you want it to be. There are very minimal restrictions with regard to complexity. I think it might have to be like 8 characters and include either a number or a special code. And it can't be the same as your ID number. And maybe can't contain your ID number since that's your username. But if you called up and said you wanted Heidi is the best ! To be your password, we would make that your password. And then you could go to metromobility.org and log in. Once you have the password and you're in, I've also been really pleased at reports back on how easy and intuitive, sort of natural it is to go in and book a ride. it really walks you through it step by step in language that anybody could understand. Um, and you know, keeps the things that you have to type and spell to a minimum pretty well. The only negatives that I've really heard from people with any intellectual, developmental, or psychiatric disabilities that way have all been around that calendar and still being able to see all those canceled rides kind of cluttering up the screen and being sort of overwhelming for some folks or confusing for some folks. So that's really the only thing I've heard. You know, while
And
I
I'm
have
glad you,
oh,
and
go
I'm
ahead.
glad you addressed that, you know, that there are mistakes, because I was worried about the calendar, you know, doing something funky, like I canceled, but then it didn't get canceled, or it did get canceled. You know, you're trying to the best you can to explain that there were errors, and then some of it's on your guys, so it doesn't always fall back like you screwed up, now you got a no-show.
Yeah.
You know, I like how you talked about that.
Yeah. What I should add there is if you do go through all the way to the end to book a ride and you're offered 3 different solutions, if you don't pick any of those, no ride will be booked. But there will be evidence in Trapeze, our software, that you got that far without selecting a ride. So either reservationist staff or staff at the service center can go in and see, because we have had a few people who kind of got right up to the end there and then got distracted and didn't end up clicking on a ride to choose. Or sometimes if all 3 solutions have exactly the same negotiated pickup time, we had one person who didn't know that they had to pick one, since they all happened to be, we had 3 options that could have picked them up exactly at their requested time. And since they all had the same exact pickup time, they thought, well, I figured I didn't have to pick one. You still do have to click on one particular ride that you're picking at the end, saying, I choose this one. And if you don't, we will see that that's what happened in Trapeze. So we are able to tell folks, we see here that you tried to book a ride online, you just didn't end up choosing one of the solutions that was offered. So in the future, you'll need to do that in order to get a trip booked. That's been about the only error or complication that we've seen come out of this, is that sometimes people start but don't finish a booking. And then if they meant to, you know, that trip will never come. We had to train our providers repeatedly because those unbooked, unfinished trips were going in unrouted, and then we're getting placed on real runs. So if people didn't choose a solution because they didn't mean to, lo and behold, a bus that they never booked was showing up at their house. So we needed to train the provider to know that they should not place those unfinished bookings on a bus. But I think we got that through. The other thing unrelated to that I should say, I wrote this down with my notes but didn't mention it. This was never, is not, meant to now, will not be used in the future to justify cutting reservationists. This is an alternative for people who would like to not wait on hold, for people who maybe have a speech impediment as related to their disability, or a language other than English as their primary language, so that they struggle with verbal communication that way. Not interested in having our contractors cut jobs as a result of this at all, and not interested in having people who want to communicate on the phone with a human, you know, lose that option or have less experience with that, or less availability for reservationists as a part of this. So I just want to, every time I talk about this publicly, I want to make sure and state that outright. It has been, you know, my key priority that I brought up all throughout the development here, that be the understanding.
You bet. Thank you, Andy.
I do have one quick question, Andy, because you make a good point.
You make it
Does
really
the
quick.
ending, when I'm done, tell me if I goofed up or if I did anything, or does it tell me I passed, so I know I have the ride? that I set up that I think I did correctly, I hope.
Yep, it tells you that you've got the ride, and then it shows the ride so that you can confirm it. And then even after you confirm it, if you go back later and look and say, shoot, that's wrong, you can always go in and cancel it right in the app and rebook it.
Okay.
So it does walk you through that, and then you have multiple chances
And
to
I
change
still
it or
get my
cancel it.
5-minute calls, and I still get all the other junk I signed up for.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
Andy, my question is to you before you get going. And sorry, Chair, if I'm out of order. I apologize, but
It's all good.
I'm trying to figure out. You said the worker ride program ended. So does that mean if I book my ride to my clinic or my pharmacy, you no longer will wait for me to get my meds? So you'll no longer have that 15-minute wait time or whatever it is. That
No, good question, Vice Chair, Chair, members of the committee. Only the healthcare worker ride program ended, where we were giving rides to people who are not Metro Mobility certified riders
Yep.
To keep clinics open.
Yep.
I think all the other supplemental services that we were doing as of last month are still in place.
Right.
So
So-
that includes the curbside ride.
Right.
A Metro Mobility customer can still book a ride, and we will wait up to 20 minutes.
So
Curbside, since that's
so example, like my daughter fell at school yesterday, had an issue. So if I had to go pick her up from school, you would wait for me for 10 or 20 minutes so that we can get back on the bus and come home, right?
Yep.
All right. But then, and if she's not scheduled to be with me, that's a whole nother issue. How do I get her on the bus if I'm at school? We have to get her somewhere.
A curbside ride is still two different bookings. So you
okay.
would book it as a curbside ride with you alone on the go, and with you as a guest
on the
return.
On the return. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
This is David. Thank you, Daryl, Heidi, and Andy for that robust discussion. We are very short on time, so I'm going to move us along here.
Yes.
Ken, do you have any updates for us on the Blue Line?
Just proceeding as usual. We had a canceled meeting last month, but should be back on schedule. We're in the final throes of creating a final.
Thank you, Ken. We could barely hear you, but it sounds like it's just kind of.
I'm sorry, I had my mic up.
I think we lost Jim.
No,
there
can
we
you hear
go.
me? Can you hear me now?
That's better. Yep.
Okay. So we had a canceled meeting last month, but have reestablished our meeting schedule. We're about to finalize a final route for the Blue Line extension. So we're working hard on that determination.
Thank you, Ken. Chris, do you have anything for us on the Green Line?
Nope, no report.
Sounds good. Daryl, do you have anything for us on Gold or Rush?
And Chair, that is similar to my situation. We do have a CMC meeting coming up tomorrow, so I will be able to report and give a better report on the Gold Line and the federal monies that we may be getting because of our new transportation commissioner. However, on the Rush Line, I'll have to dig in deep and try to dig up a report for you for next month.
Thank you, Daryl. We already got the bus priority seating update as part of our agenda. I am going to forego my report because we don't have enough time, and give members of the public a chance to chime in if they would like to now. And then member comment. So are there any members who would like to make a comment right now?
Under member comment, Chair, I would like to put me on the record saying that I understand that Andy said that they've given a lot of thought to the reduced fare relating to Metro Mobility, given the fact that Metro Transit has just reduced their fares down to $1, We have not heard the reason why Metro Mobility didn't get into that play, but I do want to go on record saying that I think there's two things here. I think we should have done a better job with the state fair issue and the buses that were out there, because there were a number of buses and a number of shuttles that were eliminated due to the bus service or due to the state fair. And I think it was our duty as citizens of transportation to make sure that those messages were conveyed to travelers that were traveling back and forth to the state fair. That message went fell on deaf ears, because I've been watching reports out at the state fair and watching people that need accessibility issues out there, and they look to us to have some of those answers before the state fair. Because they didn't have those answers, they went out there anyway and just kind of whimmed it. And I think we should do a better job next year in making sure that we get them on our schedule way ahead of time, so that we can convey the messaging correctly to the riders that use the mainline service, as well as Metro Mobility.
David, this is Chris Bates. I just have a quick question for you. I haven't seen anything lately in the minutes of what's going on with the Transportation Committee, which you sit on for us. Could you just kind of update us with stuff for the October meeting?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I will update you on that in the chair's report in October. But I can, if I'll give other members a chance to chat now, and if we have 30 seconds, I can just give you a real quick rundown about that. But do any other members have comments at the moment?
Chair, did you want me to use a minute or less to describe briefly the council's decision-making process around the reduced fare?
Yes, please.
You're more than welcome to. Yes.
So the first thing that we did was to check and see whether we needed to. As part of the fact that we can't be any more than twice the fare for fixed route on a regular route. When it came back that no, because it was a temporary thing for 2 months, that we did not need to.
Yep.
Then it got to, well, should we? And executive leadership at the council ultimately decided that just because of the size of the existing subsidy, being around a $25 subsidy per trip, that it was not appropriate. And that's the shortest possible version. That all things considered, because the subsidy per passenger is already so much greater on paratransit, that it was not appropriate to bolster the already large subsidy further.
Thank you, Andy.
That's our articulate answer. But however, people in the disability community, people that are suffering right now because they don't have the money to use the service that they need to use, they're not going to buy it. So
I hear you. The other thing that my boss just texted me to add here too, which was true, is that while fixed route is in a situation of needing to try to promote ridership in order to continue to exist,
absolutely,
paratransit obviously is in the opposite boat. We, again, at the time that this was announced, we're already at our normal levels of ridership, including the healthcare worker rides, with a diminished driver pool. So increasing ridership would hurt our solvency rather than improve it. So it wouldn't make sense for paratransit to employ promotional endeavors that were aimed at increasing ridership.
I get that. It just, I mean, as far as equitability and fairness, it doesn't play out right. But I get all the logistics and all the, financial parameters that you have to weigh to make those decisions. But in the public's eyes, they don't know all those factors. They don't see all those technical issues that you're weighing. They only see that, hey, these guys got to reduce fare, and a lot of those people are able-bodied. A lot of those people can use other bus services, can use another taxi, but Metro Mobility people a lot of times can't use another service.
Yep, I hear you, Daryl. You know, absolutely. Obviously, um, you know, we do absolutely get that, and you know, obviously, in terms of trying to maintain the safety of passengers on board and physical distancing, um, you know, the council was just wanting to err more on the side of anything they could do to keep paratransit ridership about where it is
Sure.
and keep folks, you know, safe from COVID as much as possible using public transit, in addition to those financial concerns. So that's not to say that I don't hear everything you're saying in terms of the lens, and I would very much get the frustration of someone who's looking at that and going, come on now. You know, you got the most economically disenfranchised minority that exists in the country, and they're having to pay full fare still. I hear you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. We are at 2:33. I do see your hand, Carrie. If anybody needs to jump off, please do. I don't want to hold you past the allotted time for the meeting, but Carrie, bring
I
us
just
home.
wanted to ask Andy, does that mean that we have to are supposed to ignore people who are not paying their fare, but people who have metro tickets still have to pay? Is that what I'm hearing? I mean, that's what I'm understanding.
Yeah, what's going on is that Metro Transit for everybody for the next 2 months is reducing the fare for all trips. Their regular fare is going to be $1 on the regular city bus and light rail for the next 2 months. And the question was just whether or not Metro Mobility was also going to do that dollar fare thing for everybody. And the answer is no. Metro Mobility is keeping its normal fare structure in place for September and October, even though Metro Transit has dropped down to $1 for everybody.
But if they extend that, then you guys might look at another option, right? If they extend it more than the 2 months, then would you guys look at considering maybe a reduction or not?
Yeah, we've got to look at what is a promotional, short-term promotional fare structure, you know, so that would certainly be something we'd need to consider.
Yep.
I want to respect. I know, Andy, you had a hard 2:30 cutoff time, and you're already 5 minutes over. So, thank you all very much for participating this month in the Transportation Accessibility Advisory Committee. And we can also take that reduced fare discussion offline to Daryl and Andy if we need to.
And I do have one thing I wanted to say really quickly. This is serious.
It's got to be quick, Heidi. It's got to be
Okay.
quick. It can't be a question.
I don't know if Andy's still here, but
It can't be a question, Heidi.
and I just didn't know, who do we report to make sure it gets heard? Because I saw a Metro Mobility driver walk away from a vehicle that was still had the key in to get lunch and to come back. And I know in the past we had a vehicle stolen because they left the key in the thing and they went joyride. And he came back like 10 minutes later with Taco Bell in West St. Paul when I was heading to the store. So I want to do the proper thing and make sure that doesn't happen. And also that wastes gas where I don't want it to fall back that, you know, the fare goes up because gas is short and other things, you know, for the future. So I just want to pass that on.
Thank you, Heidi, for bringing that up. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Great job.
Thank you.
Thanks, team. Good job.